Hi, and welcome to The Impact on FinTech TV, down on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I'm your host, Jeff Gitterman, and I'm joined today by Kiff Gallagher, Executive Director at Global Heat Reduction. Kiff, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here, Jeff. Thank you.
So we always do a thing on the show, a little bit about your background, but most importantly, why impact, why climate, why are you working on these things instead of out making real money?
Tell you, man, I'm scared. I don't know about you. I live in Washington, D.C. 8 days last year, we couldn't leave the house. We were advised not to leave the house. And I didn't grow up that way. We used to have seasons. I have a 10-year-old boy. I truly am worried, not just about the future, but the present, like the very near term, let alone the long term. So I just thought time is all we have, and I'd like to dedicate it to this.
So talk to me about the problems with how we're counting climate change right now and the factors that might be missing into the forward-looking models that we're doing.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't understand that roughly half of global warming is driven by not CO2, not carbon. It's driven by so-called super pollutants, often short-lived climate pollutants, but pollutants like methane, low-level ozone, HFCs, nitrous oxide, black carbon. These are orders of magnitude more potent than CO2 in terms of driving heat. Carbon markets are all about slowing the rate and cooling the planet, slowing the rate of warming and cooling the planet. But we're failing to measure those pollutants that do so most intensely.
So why is the big battle in climate change and carbon accounting and other things all focused on CO2? Why are we missing the boat on these other pollutants?
Well, that's right. It's CO2 centric. I think because of the Paris Agreement, they needed a unit of account. They didn't know how fast the planet was going to warm. It's gone faster than even the most aggressive scientific estimates. Because CO2 is in the atmosphere for centuries, it's virtually there forever, right, until you remove it or until nature draws it down. They thought this would make sense. So the unit of account is called CO2e, and E is the equivalent over a 100-year period. So the unit is actually measured in GWP 100. That's global warming potential of carbon over 100 years. And then they figured we'll put all these other emissions in that basket as well because it can contain them. The problem is you've created a false equivalency when it comes to heat.
Right.
So for that, you need a near-term measuring stick. We don't have 100 years. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that. So we're not measuring what matters most right now.
And I don't want to add fuel to the fire, so pun intended, but on top of that, we've been not really focused on how long the carbon sinks that absorb a lot of the pollutants that we're pumping into the air can keep doing that. As I understand it, we're under a general assumption that trees and oceans could just keep absorbing carbon, and yet last year was the first year where they actually didn't increase the rate of carbon. So it was flat. They didn't absorb the human production of CO2 that they normally were in the past.
And even worse, we're now seeing positive feedback loops, which are actually negative outcomes, right, where wetlands, for instance, are releasing methane. So people talk about tipping points, so-called irreversible climate tipping points. That's the big threat right now, is that the Greenland permafrost, the ice sheets, the ocean currents, the Amazon collapse, these are irreversible tipping points that create runaway heating that humanity cannot survive. And the question is, can we get to decarbonization in 2050, which is where all these targets are aimed, without triggering those? And the answer pretty much is no, unless we target these super pollutants.
So what is the Global Heat Reduction Initiative? Talk us through it.
Yeah, so we're part of SES Global Services, which is a scientific certification firm. It's been around since the mid-'80s. Our scientists worked with a handful of other global climate scientists for over a decade to create a new protocol that would measure not only typical conventional GHG protocol data, but also all drivers of warming over any time frame. And so we've taken this protocol, and the Global Heat Reduction Initiative is bringing this peer-reviewed latest IPCC science into carbon markets to help direct carbon markets to have both a long-term, that's critical, but also a near-term target. And so we're doing this through a new footprinting service, which is, we call it Total Climate Footprint. The whole system we call Total Climate Accounting,
right.
where you get more actionable data to target your investments, and then a registry, so to the extent you're targeting your internal abatement, you can be more targeted and more focused on these super pollutants. And if you're offsetting, we're bringing projects onto a new registry that are targeting super pollutants. So they're methane reduction projects, black carbon avoidance projects, those types of things.
So if I'm a CEO or CSO, why should I be reaching out to you guys?
Well, the World Economic Forum recently estimated that 1.5 to over $3 trillion of economic losses annually due to the effects of extreme heat. A lot of that risk is carried by business. It's facilities risk, it's commodity risk, supply chain risk, it's insurance risk, it's workforce risk, it's product, risk. And they're noticing that, and they're trying to figure that out. And they're looking at the costs of what it's going to take to meet these targets. And 75% in a recent survey of sustainability leads at these companies, from multinationals to medium-sized businesses, have said they're concerned they're not going to meet their targets. So the question is how do you accelerate your impact with the same amount or even less money? It doesn't require new technologies. It doesn't require a new global political agreement. It just requires the ability to measure what matters most and mitigate it. So that's the main reason.
There have been many problems with voluntary carbon markets and carbon registry. There's been, if not outright fraud, there's certainly been misrepresentation that's been occurring. Talk to me about how your platform is different.
Great. Well, okay, first of all, we have the benefit of being a latecomer, so that means a lot of learning and analysis of the problems that have been happening. Of course, we build in all the critical safeguards that are now being implemented across the voluntary market for project and credit integrity. But effectively, we have a different protocol and a different platform. We've been discussing the different protocol. It provides all the critical data that you need, as well as additional data related to heat impacts over time. So you can actually compare credits for what their near-term heat impact will be. And then secondly, we have a digital-first, blockchain-based platform that enables full transparency, full traceability. All the data is visible, so you can see it. And all the key actors, the buyers, the sellers, and the independent verifiers, are all working on a single platform, making it far more efficient.
Yeah, I want to stress too right here that there's been this idea that moving to natural gas was a sustainable or more sustainable view, but as we have discovered over the years, natural gas produces a lot of methane and other pollutants. So we have this problem right now where we're adding data centers everywhere. We're throwing more energy at it. We need intermittent, we can't function with just intermittent energy, so we have backup peaker plants that are natural gas driven. So we talk a lot on this show about being in an addition economy, not a transition economy, because yes, we're adding more renewables than any other type of energy, but we're not reducing in any way the dirty energy. And if we just have a CO2 measure, we get to ignore some of that data. So to your point, if we're not including all of the heat-inducing chemicals and pollutants into a global factor, then we could actually reduce CO2 and still be blowing the chart off of our heat indexes.
100%. You mentioned data centers. Another one is electrification of cars worldwide. And between the two of those, we're actually seeing energy demand increase significantly. You bring up natural gas, that effectively is methane. There's over 3.5 million orphan methane wells leaking all over the place. So this is an intervention that doesn't need to cost more money. It doesn't require fancy technologies. It just requires the will and the measurement capability of targeting these pollutants. And that's what we're really trying to bring to market.
So 2035, we're sitting here doing the show. You've been successful. What does it look like?
Well, it looks like we're far along in the energy transition and maybe rounded the corner on climate change with respect to emissions, CO2 and the rest of them. Hopefully we've seen a scaling of these technological interventions around carbon direct removal. And yes, hopefully we've enabled companies to build as part of their portfolio a targeted approach to mitigation reduction that's not available now, so that we're able to steer carbon markets in the direction they need to go to solve the near-term crisis.
Awesome. Love it, Kiff. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks again, Jeff.
That's it for The Impact on FinTech TV. I'm your host, Jeff Gitterman. Until next time.